I'll bring in now Richard Roth. He's a Democratic strategist and founder of the partner of the Roth law firm. Good to see you again. President Trump finds himself, as you know, battling against criticism, again, that he didn't do enough at the start of the crisis here, Richard, with Nancy Pelosi even asking for an investigation into what he knew and when. Are we at this point in the crisis that this type of criticism is legitimate, Richard?
So I think the answer is the criticism is legitimate, but I don't think we're at that point of the crisis. I'm sort of taking your question apart. We have to focus on one thing. Sure. The fact that this hospital is coming into New York, the New York Harbor is fantastic. Just as far as size of beds go, which you had just asked, NYU has Tisch Hospital, 725 beds. Mount Sinai has 1,100 beds. Elmhurst has 500. So to bring in another 1,000, 1,100 beds in the New York Harbor is a huge plus. I think it's time for us not to be for Nancy to take it easy. I think Nancy, there will be a time to look at what Donald knew and what Donald Trump knew and when he knew it. But right now we have really one focus, and we got to get to that apex. We got it 14 to 21 days before we get to that apex, and this is behind us. Should be Nancy Pelosi's concern. Yeah, absolutely. As we take a look there again, as the Comfort is making its way again to New York City, providing that 1,100 beds there, 1,000 plus beds rather, 1,100 medical staff as well. Let's not forget that as well. Operating rooms, ICU beds, definitely what is needed right now. Jennifer, especially when you hear, obviously, the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, will be there when it reaches Pier 90, when Comfort does. And speaking of Cuomo, you know, he's been touted recently as, hey, could he be someone that replaces Joe Biden coming up here in November? It is another scenario that is playing out of this whole thing. Jennifer, your thoughts on that?
Well, first, I just have to address what Richard just said. He used a Watergate phrase regarding the coronavirus crisis and said, what did the president know and when did he know it? I just have to say to my friend Richard, that is disgusting, my friend. I wish you would do less screaming and more complimenting and more focusing like Governor Cuomo has done on this crisis, and we'll all get through it. But to your question, Sean, Governor Cuomo's approval ratings are actually at this point higher than Donald Trump's approval ratings. Now, granted, he is a Democrat governor in a very liberal state, but Andrew Cuomo's approval ratings are in the 80% range. And President Trump addressed that this morning. He actually agreed. He thinks that maybe Andrew Cuomo would be a better candidate than Joe Biden. And I'll tell you how Joe Biden could be a big hero here to his own Democratic Party. He could say, you know what, this is a once-in-a-generation challenge. I think this is not the challenge for my generation. I'm going to hand it over to the next generation of leaders, and I will give my delegates to somebody like an Andrew Cuomo and endorse him and Uncle Joe step out. That's the most diplomatic way to handle it. I would love to see a head-to-head matchup between President Donald Trump and Governor Andrew Cuomo. I actually also approve of the job Cuomo has done, as do a lot of females that I talk to who are very, very concerned about this crisis.
Yeah, Governor Cuomo has definitely been very much transparent. He's been holding press conferences every single day. Richard, I want to get your response to what Jennifer had to say and then your thoughts on Cuomo as well.
Sure. Jennifer misunderstood me. What I said was Pelosi is trying to find out what he knew and when he knew it. And I said, this is not the time. So, Jennifer, maybe your microphone isn't working too well on your Skype. But let's talk about what's going on now. Every governor across the country is getting better approval ratings than Donald Trump. There was a report done by Monmouth County last week. Look it up. Governors getting 70% approval ratings. Donald Trump is wavering at 50%. The governors are addressing the problem because the governors are taking this very seriously and are driven by data. They're not driven by the market. And that's what's going on. That's why Cuomo's coming on so strong. Because number one, he's driven by data. Number two, he's not dealing with the nonsense that we have to deal with Donald Trump. And number three, his state is getting hit far significantly, our state, far significantly worse than any other state. So that's what's going on. Every state, you go from New Jersey to Connecticut to Florida to Michigan to Louisiana, all the governors getting great ratings. Can Cuomo come in for Biden? I mean, I would love to see that. I think the problem Biden has right now is it's just that where we are. Unfortunately for any candidate, whether it be Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, you name it, they're not in the forefront because what's in the forefront is the pandemic. So Donald Trump is getting a lot of of really good TV time. Yes, he sits there and reads, better reading than going away from the script, because sometimes going away from the script says the word great too much. But the bottom line is that Donald Trump now is controlling the media because of this pandemic, not intentionally, but that's just where we are. And in every crisis, the leader always gets a bump up in the beginning. Let's see where we are in 2, 4, 6 weeks. I think it's premature to determine how Joe Biden's going to do. I'd love to see Cuomo come in. He's a very strong candidate. I think he'd blow the socks off of Donald Trump. I don't know if that's necessarily possible in light of where we are now, although the primary in New York was also put off for 2 weeks.
Yeah, that was put off as well. Good to point out. Jennifer, last comments. I have time for that. I just want to hear from you, too. And can you believe we're in a presidential election year and you really wouldn't know it?
No, you wouldn't. And look, speaking of data points, Richard touched on the president's decision to continue the social distancing guidelines through April 30th were actually based on 12 scientific data points. Look it up. He made that decision based on science and on data regarding the coronavirus curve. And look, Barack Obama had at the highest, I think, at this point in his term, about a 47% approval rating. Most presidents would love to be where President Trump is today, 53%, 54%, depending on the poll. And there was an interesting Newsmax article everyone should check out talking about how he is now the George W. Bush of 9/11, that strong current at his back. I think it's awfully hard to beat President Trump come November.
All right, that is Jennifer Kearns, contributor for the Daily Caller in the Hill, and Richard Roth, Democratic strategist and founder.
Next time.
Next time, Richard. Yeah, Roth Law Firm. Good to see you both.